Friendship isn't the big things, it's a million little things. Hello there, friends, and welcome to this, another episode of A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is where we break down and discuss episodes of TV shows that you may not have even heard of. I believe these TV shows need a little more love, and that is what this platform is here to do. Each week we will be covering different shows from all over the globe. We'll be breaking down each episode, giving you the main highlights, and going through it bit by bit. But for now, I think it's best that we find out what's on the menu today. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast, and that's the third time I've done this, so I'm quite happy I got the title of my own show right. Honestly, this is now episode 12 of season 6, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be going into a different show that we've never touched before, but it's a show that I think really, when it came out, didn't get a lot of press, didn't get a lot around it, and it should have done, because some of the names that are in it, Hayley Atwell, David Tennant, Kunal Nayyar, are big names, and this should have been more deserving. And this is a British TV show, and it got one of the Big Bang Theory cast members in it. That's crazy. That shouldn't really be happening, especially when, at the time, it was still at quite a high peak for that show. But as for now, I think we're just going to get into it. So, this is called Criminal UK, and it's a police procedural drama. It only lasted a couple of seasons, and it is only very short, which is why I wanted to include it, because it is just a stopgap and then we can move on. Obviously this is episode 12, so we're only going to be moving on to one episode, but you get where I'm going. But we will be covering season 2 at some point. So, this is Criminal UK, season 1, episodes 1 to 3. The series stars Catherine Kelly as Natalie Hobbs, Lee Ingleby as Tony Myerscough, Mark Stanley as Hugo Duffy, Roshenda Sandell as Vanessa Warren, and Nicholas Pinnock as Paul Ottiger. Episode 1, Edgar. This episode stars David Tennant as Dr. Edgar Fallon and Lolita Chakrabarti as Anita Baines. So we see that the police are actually interrogating a man, Edgar Fallon, over the death of his daughter Nikki, or his stepdaughter. But they are coming into the final few hours. I think they have 2 hours until they have to let him go with no evidence, or very little evidence. And for the past several hours, all they've had out of him is no comment. They're trying all different tricks in the book to try and get him to confess, but nothing is happening. One of the sergeants, who is watching on, talks about a technique that they're trying to use where they've put a pen in front of him, and he hasn't even touched it for 2 hours, which, if someone was innocent, they are generally fidgety, and having a pen in front of them would be a temptation to actually do something with that pen. But he has done nothing. He is sat stone-faced just all throughout saying no comment. And this is all at the advice of his counsel, Anita Baines. But with the final hours approaching, they are getting desperate. They need something. They need a different tact. And so when Paul Ottiger comes over from West Midlands Police to help out with this case, it would seem that Paul previously worked in this area with this particular team, but he hasn't for a while now. But they're all familiar with him, and it's at the choice of Natalie Hobbs that he take over from Hugo Duffy. The other detective that is in there, Tony, is allowed to keep the lead once Paul walks in. But he takes over from Hugo, sits down, and just begins to stare right at Dr. Fallon. Dr. Fallon's counsel believes that they are trying to intimidate, and so wants it on the record that that is exactly what they're trying to do. And so they acknowledge it. After a moment, they begin back to the interview and start to talk about how losing a daughter in the way that this person has should be affecting them. Paul begins to recount his own thoughts on what would happen if his child had been the subject of a murder. He wouldn't rest until the person was found, and yet it would seem that Edgar Fallon had not only had his daughter killed, but he'd driven back from a netball tournament where his daughter was to just go home, and he can't understand it. He can't understand why he came back to London without his daughter, it would seem. They have pictures of him in his car coming back, and there is no sight of her whatsoever. He's even got the top down on his Audi, and she's not there. So they know that he came back to London alone on the day of his daughter's disappearance. And so Dr. Fallon decides to actually talk about what happened. Detective Tony tells him that they also know that his daughter Nikki was in a sexual relationship with a man, not a boy, because the pathologist has told them that it was someone who was fully grown. Nikki was 14, and they believe that it was Dr. Fallon that had done this all along. He'd killed her, and he was having a sexual relationship with her. Every time that they'd gone to one of these tournaments, he actually booked the hotels, and they always stayed in a double bed. They never had twin rooms, they never had separate rooms. They were always in the same room, in the same bed, even though the costs were the same, and so it would make no sense not to have twin beds, unless something was going on. He, however, tells the officers that that didn't happen. Now that he has been accused of the sexual misconduct, he wants to clear his name, and after all this time sat in this interrogation room, he's decided that his advice of counsel doesn't matter anymore. He needs to make sure that the story is clear. He tells the officers that he didn't do anything wrong, apart from one thing. He left his stepdaughter at this hotel and drove back to London after he'd found out that she was in a sexual relationship with the team coach. And so the events played out like this. He found out that she was having sex with her team coach. He told her never to see him again and pushed her backwards. She fell through a table, which shattered on impact and fractured her arm. Because he's a doctor, he then set her arm in plaster and made sure that everything was set properly. She then told him that she was going to go, and she went off to see the coach. He followed her to his room and tried to get her out, but she just told him to leave, and so he did. He drove back to London, and the next time that he heard anything about her, she was dead. And the only person that it could have been is this coach. They begin to ask why you didn't say all this in the first place. If it was a different man, if it was someone else who did this, why have you sat here for so long now, not giving us an answer? And so he tells them that he didn't want to think about the fact that his daughter was having sex with someone. It's not a nice thought to have when it comes to your own children, that one day they will be sexually active, but not only that they are sexually active before they should be. However, it would seem that they're just about to let him go and do some more investigation into the new suspect, but at that point, new evidence comes to light. Hugo, the officer that had actually been taken out of the room, had begun to look through the files again, and as he did, he found something very interesting. He finds a way to summon Tony out of the room and actually hands him a file. Tony heads back into the interrogation and begins the final few minutes of what has been an absolute saga. Since they know that he had plastered his own daughter's arm up, they found out that when Dr. Fallon had actually got back to London, he'd filled his car up. But not only that, he'd paid £75 to actually get his car filled up. He says, well, fuel is expensive. They say an Audi A3 would roundabout be £60, which he doesn't comment on. The detective then tells him that you got your car valeted, to which he again says, I don't remember. But they say, we've got the receipt, we know what happened. They begin to break it down for him. They say that with the car being valeted, it leads to more suspicion of him. Because his daughter was off somewhere in the middle of nowhere having sex with a man who is the same age as him, and yet he was getting his car valeted. It just doesn't add up. You'd be going to authorities, or you'd be trying to get something done about this. They begin to then show him photos of his own car. They also show him photos of his daughter's arm in plaster. There is a small imprint on the plaster because it hadn't dried yet when she actually died. They then show him pictures of the boot of his car and an enhanced version of the mat that is on the bottom of his car, which is only exclusive to that brand of car. and the patterns both match of the actual plaster which is on the arm of his young daughter. They begin to put the story together and say that he had actually taken her out of the hotel after he'd injured her arm and wrapped it up again. He'd put her in the boot of his car, he'd driven back to London, he killed her, and then left her to be found. And it's only in the dying hours that he comes up with a name of a man who would have been of interest. And it's at that point that they realise that they have everything they need on him to actually charge him for this. And as they read him his rights, they take him away as he heads to the elevator to be booked. Detective Inspector Ottiger comes over to him, and Dr. Fallon tells him, "Your daughter is very lucky to have a father like you." And Detective Ottiger tells him that, "I don't have a daughter." And so it was just all a game, it was all a ruse to try and find out information from this man. And they did, and they booked him for it. Every single one of the characters in this, or every single one of the actors in this, acted their fucking ass off for this shot. It was all condensed in one building, all roughly in one area, both sides of the mirror from an interrogation screen and also just out in the corridor, but it was all in and around the same area. And I love that kind of shot, and you know I do. If you've listened to me talk about Inside Number 9, I can't get enough of it. But David Tennant, I don't think there's many better than what an absolute fucking legend this man is. I'm sat watching him and I'm just in awe. The guy can act circles round anybody. It is absolutely ridiculous how good that man is. And for a first episode, to have David Tennant in it and to do a job as good as this, world-beating. Absolutely world-beating. So if you haven't watched it, go and watch it because it's fucking brilliant. Episode 2, Stacey. This episode stars Hayley Atwell as Stacey Doyle, Mark Quarterly as Jeremy Nicholson, and Shubnam Sharaf as DC Kyle Petty. This time we see the combination of Inspector Hobbs and Inspector Warren as they speak to Stacey about the attempted murder of a man called Roderick, who is currently in a critical condition in hospital. At first, Stacey is very evasive of all questions that are being asked of her. Not like in the last episode, she's not no commenting anything, but she is aggressive with her answers. She has very much an attitude problem when it comes to this type of authority. And it seems to be that sort of UK estate mentality of, I don't want to snitch on anyone, or I don't want to stitch myself up. And so as she's speaking to them, she is disregarding everything that they're saying. Eventually, however, they tell her, "We know you did this. We've got the evidence. So if it goes to court, you'll be taken down. So you might as well just confess." And so she begins to tell them the situation of the night that it happened. Roderick is her sister Mary's boyfriend, and night after night she'd been going over to the flat and seeing what he was doing to her. Some nights he was great, others he wasn't. And this one night, Stacey had just had enough. She saw her sister black and blue, face all swelled up, puffy, and she knew what he'd been doing to her. Her and Roderick always got on, but Roderick was a bully. That night she'd already gone and purchased some rat poison and a bottle of whiskey for Roderick. She went into the kitchen, she took a glass for herself, and she put poison in the rest of the bottle and handed it to Roderick. Throughout the night she was just sipping away while he was chugging at the bottle. Eventually he ended up on the floor on his knees at around about 2 a.m. and he was slowly dying. Stacey left him where he was and went upstairs to bed and got into bed with Mary. And she stayed there like the sister that she is, and she looked after her. The next morning when they came down, they found him there and he was still alive, but they just stepped over him and left the flat. At this point, Mary was meant to be in a different part of the country. Stacey knew that she could go round and just hang out with Roderick if she wanted to, and that was the plan. She was going to do that, but Mary interrupted that. And so she took Mary away. And eventually Roderick was found and taken to the hospital. But if it wasn't for him being such a bully and such a nasty piece of work, she wouldn't have done this. She did it to protect her sister, and that's all that matters. The detectives think that's it. It's all wrapped up, and they dust their hands off, and they're about to go and enjoy their Christmas party. But Detective Hobbs just can't stop this funny feeling inside. that gut instinct that you get that you're unsure of. Stacey's already been taken to get booked in, and Jeremy, her lawyer, has already gone down with her to make sure that the paperwork's done right before he has to go home for the night. Before they go out, Inspector Hobbs just gets everyone together and asks the question whether it felt right. They think that they absolutely nailed this, but she cannot be sure. She feels something is wrong. They bring Stacey back up and they begin to start the questioning process again. After a moment, Detective Hobbs hands Detective Warren a note and asks Detective Warren, who has sort of got the backup of Stacey, to ask her a really hard question. And that question is, how long have you been sleeping with Roderick? Stacey begins to tell the story of how she actually met him. She met him down the pub, and Stacey is married, but things weren't going right. She fancied him and she knew it was wrong, but she wanted him. She didn't do anything, but she introduced him to Mary. As time went on, the more time that they hung out, she saw that Mary wasn't the right match for him, but she kept him in her life, and therefore, when it actually came to being around him, she could be, whenever she wanted. Eventually that turned to sex, and they were sleeping together on the regular. Didn't matter whether Mary was at home or what, she would go over and see him, and if she wasn't, all the better. But she also knew what he was like, and she saw it on multiple occasions. She'd go over, Mary would be black and blue, but she'd still end up sleeping with him. She wouldn't say anything to him. Eventually, one night, her sister rang her and told her that she'd got a rat in her flat. Stacey told her, well, get the landlord to sort it out. And she said, no, I need you to bring some poison over. Next time you come over, bring some poison with you, and also don't forget to get Roderick his whiskey. Stacey knew instantly what she was going to do, but couldn't stop her. When she turned up at the flat, she'd brought exactly what her sister wanted. And that night she told her sister Mary loud enough so Roderick could hear that she couldn't stay, and she left. However, she didn't leave. She actually hung about on the estate, which is where all the reports of that she was on the estate came from. At 2 a.m, when she's reported to have made such a disturbance that people have suspected her of killing Roderick, she was banging on the door to their flat. Eventually her sister opened it and she saw Roderick on the floor. Her sister didn't know what to do, and so Stacey put the crime scene together so it would look like her sister didn't do anything, but it was her instead. She wanted to take the fall for her sister due to her own guilt over the fact that she'd been sleeping with Roderick for so long. And not only that, she'd introduced her to this monster. And so she was willing to give up her own innocence to get her sister off, because she believed that Mary was a lot better than what people think she would be as a killer. However, the detective tells her that we're here to find the truth. We aren't here to find justice. That is what a court and a jury are here to do. We are just here to find the truth. And so Stacey heads downstairs and is put out on bail. The team gather together and they head out for some Christmas drinks, but they all seem affected by this case because it feels like the wrong outcome, even though it's the right one. I know what I said before about David Tennant, but Hayley Atwell can fucking act as well. My God. I always put Hayley Atwell as Agent Carter. That's how I know her. Obviously from the Captain America films, her own series, Agent Carter. She's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But she's always Peggy Carter. In this, she is totally different. It's like night and day. She is this brash, hard-spoken, Cockney woman who, I say Cockney, East London accent female that is just hard-nosed and against authority. She feels like she comes from the streets, and I've seen Hayley Atwell in interviews. She's just not that person, and the transformation is fucking amazing. I know they're actors, and I get it, but it's so engaging to watch an actress you know so well for a certain role do this kind of acting. I watched recently a show called Joan, which is actually Sophie Turner's latest show, and obviously I'm watching her in Game of Thrones at the minute. And the contrast, I know that there is a hell of a lot of years between the two of them, but the contrast between the two styles, it's amazing. But this episode was fantastic. Hayley Atwell just blows it off the screen, and for two pieces of TV to be back-to-back that good, it's beyond me how good it is. So, let's see what the next episode brings. Episode 3, Jay. This episode stars Yusuf Kirkor as Jay and Kevin Eldon as Michael Walker. Prior to an interview, Hugo is brushing up on his interview skills. He's trying to find out some information from a man, and time is critical. And so they need to move as fast as they can, but they also need to get this right. They know that there is going to be a group of people watching because this is of high importance. Jay then comes into the room, and throughout he seems to be very much in the same vein as the first episode. He's no commenting and doesn't want to talk to anyone about anything. He has no solicitor at this point, and every time he is asked a question, he just doesn't want to give any information away. It turns out that the information that they're looking for is the location of a truck. Jay is a truck driver, and as he's come back into the country with this load that he's got, he's ended up leaving it in a certain place, but nobody knows where. Nobody can track it, nobody can find it. The only information of the location is in Jay's head, and so they are trying to find out where it is. According to a shipment from a previous week, which had illegal immigrants inside, there should be another one this week, and they believe that it is Jay's. The one from the previous week had been flagged, and all parties involved had been arrested, and the asylum seekers within have been detained. However, one of the women inside actually has 2 children that are being delivered this week, and since this truck is in the middle of nowhere and they don't know where it is, they need to find it because there could be people inside. Jay is evasive of the question because he doesn't want to give up the location, and he continues even though Detective Ottiger gets in his face and starts yelling and screaming at him. After a while, he can't take it anymore and he demands that he has some legal representation. They think that it's going to take some time for him to get there, but actually they've already thought ahead, or at least Vanessa has. She's already contacted Michael Walker and he will be the legal representation for this man. As he has time with his client, he essentially tells him to only give information that he feels comfortable with. He also heard Detective Ottiger berating him from outside, so he knows that this man has been bullied in a sense. But right now, time is of the essence. Ottiger is replaced by Petty, and they begin to sit down again. Throughout, however, Michael Walker keeps looking at Detective Duffy's cup, and it would seem that throughout the episodes there has been a focus on this cup. It's here that Michael Walker asks, "Where did you get your cup of coffee from?" Because there's one coffee machine out in the lobby, and there isn't another one anywhere else in the building. And yet, you've always got fresh coffee. Hugo tells him that he has a flask and that there's nothing dodgy going on. But actually, it would seem that there is. Because in the cup is actually vodka. And so, under the conditions that he's got, Detective Hugo Duffy shouldn't be doing any interviews whatsoever. They drag him out of the room and they berate him. But then, Detective Myerscroft thinks, what harm is it going to do? We need to find these people, and there's nobody better who knows this than Hugo. So we send Hugo back in, and we see if we can appeal to him some other way to find this truck. We need this location, and we can't just let this man go right now. Otherwise, we could end up with a bunch of deaths on our hands. Everyone agrees, knowing that Hugo is going to be suspended anyway, and they send him back in. Before he starts the interview again, he hides the button to turn on all the cameras. He begins talking to Jay, man to man, and just tells him outright what he needs. He also tells him about his own afflictions and his own desperation when it comes to the fact that he has been drinking vodka for months. Jay begins to feel a real sympathy for him, and he knows what's best. He knows that he can't get out of this situation, and if these people, these young children included, die, then it's going to be on his conscience. And so he ends up giving the location out of the truck, against the wishes of his legal counsel. But he feels that since Hugo has been so open with him that he needs to be open himself. All they needed was the location, and none of the actual confession really mattered that much. And once they find the truck and find it empty, none of it really matters anymore. Yes, he's been doing bad things, but all they're going to do is keep an eye on him from now on. Now, there's a couple of shots in this episode that are fucking brilliant. So, there is one over the back of Jay's head that looks over the table at the other two on the other side, and it makes Jay look like an absolute mountain of a man. And he does when he walks in the room, in fairness. He looks big, but they're trying to make him look bigger. They're trying to make him look more intimidating, even though he's actually a softie. He doesn't want to give out any information, because if he gives the information, people are going to know. The bad people that have hired him are going to know that he told. And therefore, if they know, his kids are in danger. And one of the other shots is when they talk about the mother of these children. So they have a screen in the room and they show the picture of the mother. But to ensure that you get the full effect of how it feels for Jay, you get everything in one shot. So there is a mirror in the background, which obviously conceals the people behind it. The screen is facing the mirror, and the camera is actually pointing towards the mirror. So the mirror reflects the actual TV, and then everyone turns towards the camera to look at this screen. And so you get the anguished mother on the screen, as well as the look of Jay's horror on his face, because he knows that this is real now. This isn't just drugs or toys or whatever it is that's coming into the country, the illegal shit that's coming in. This is real. This is people. And as much as he wants to confess, he knows that he can't for the safety of his own family. And this episode is fucking nuts. It's been such a good series, and I wish it had been longer. I wish it had been 6 episodes or more. I know there's 4 more coming, but I wish it had been 2 6-episode series, because the acting in it is fantastic, and the jeopardy within is amazing. You really feel it. You really feel the tension of the room. I was biting my fingers throughout, because you feel it. You can feel everything that these people are going through. You can see it on their faces, and it's magnificent. This is why I wanted to cover it. It's a fucking good show. But as for now, I think I'm done. So I'm going to leave it there. There is 1 more episode to go in this season, and I'm going to reveal what is coming up in next season, which I've actually had to change around due to the fact that I found something or a couple of things that I really wanted to cover. So unfortunately, next season we're not going to have any Inside Number 9, but it will be coming back for season 8. But obviously next week we're going to be covering Santa Clarita Diet season 2, so that's going to be finished. And then we just need to go into season 7 with some very fresh new shows, some things we've never covered, some things that we've covered before, but they're all good. So in season 7, the shows that we have covered, we're going to be covering Hannibal season 3, because I really want to finish that off. Ginny and Georgia season 2, because Ginny and Georgia is coming back, so we need to go into that. A show called Night Sleeper, which just recently aired on the BBC and was fantastic. I couldn't get enough of it. It was such a good show. Without Sin, which is just a one-shot, but that's season 1. And then 2 shows from these last few years, which I've really enjoyed. Northern Lights, which is a recent show, but had me absolutely heartbroken throughout. And it's another sort of A Million Little Things. Just a quick one-shot again. It's just a 1 season, but it's brilliant. And then a Netflix show called The Baby, which is a horror. So something fun, and obviously I am going to be trying to record that as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I won't obviously get it until next year, so it won't be for Halloween, but we've got Santa Clarita for Halloween, so that'll do. Anyway, as for today, I'm finished rambling, so thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Please go and subscribe to Patreon. It means the fucking world to me. But as for today, I am done. So I thank you for your time. I hope you're all doing well out there. And as always, I will speak to you soon. Bye. And that is it for now, amigos. And yes, I am as angry as you are at me for that sentence, but I hope you enjoyed the show and had some fun along the way. It means a lot that you are listening and supporting me. This is an independent podcast after all, and doesn't get a lot of backing, so it is great to know that you're out there, you're listening. And if you want to come talk to me on any of the platforms I'm on, just come say hi. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm even a little bit on TikTok. I don't post that much, but I'm on there. And you can also drop comments in the comment sections on any of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. But as always, thank you for your time, and I will speak to you soon.